What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Golden Dice Podcast Color Pie video. So what this video basically tries to do is to take a leader and try to show you what their builds might look like in every color. So far we've done this. We started off with Luke, we did Han, and we did Boba 2 weeks ago. So obviously, you know, they're all a little bit out of date, but it's going to be fun for us to come back post-release and post-full set and talk about what these decks might actually look like now. And so today we're going to do Sabine, and again, it's not necessarily, hey, each of these colors is really good, but it's at least, hey, here's the different play styles for this leader in different colors, and maybe what that looks like, and see what you actually prefer, because there actually are some really neat plays between each color, and funny enough, I actually think mono might be the least exciting, but we'll get into that. So Sabine is a aggression, heroism leader. She is an action, exhaust her to deal 1 damage to each base. Her epic action is if you control 4 or more resources, you can deploy her. She's a 2/5 Mandalorian, Rebel, and Spectre. And her on attack when she flips is deal 1 damage to each enemy base. If you've been playing the game on TTS, if you've been following content creators, you know that Sabine is just a really, really good leader right now. So she's worth knowing what is in her deck anyways, even if you don't plan to play her. And so in the first part, what we're going to do here is essentially go through what cards are even just staples within her deck. And so this page pretty much just has all the cards that you are very likely going to see, especially out of red, right? As you get into different colors, we'll talk about what comes in. But these 8 units right here of ground and space are almost auto-includes. Spec 4 Soldier is, a 1-drop. A 2/2, which is fine, but really he can help you close the game, because if you have a Sentinel unit stopping you, he can get rid of that, because a unit, his when played is a unit loses Sentinel for this phase. So that means the rest of your units can hit face if you have him, and then he's also just a body himself. Sabine Wren arguably is one of the best 2-drops in the game. She's a 2/3. She trades into everything. She does have the flexibility to ping 1 into the base if you're killing the unit anyways. So she's just really good, and I decided to use her OP alt art for this. I think it looks so good, and I've been meaning to swap over and use that in all my videos and even my print and play. I just keep forgetting all the time. Next is Fighters for Freedom, and this is one of the core build-around cards within the deck. It's a 3/4, has Saboteur, but its ability is when you play another aggression card, you may deal 1 damage to the base. And so obviously, I'm talking about core cards, and I'm already at 6, and you're running them as 3 of. You already have 18 of these cards in your deck before we even get into events as well. And then obviously, you can add some of the extra ones. The 3 in the corner are ones we'll talk about in a minute. So it just pings really good. We'll see how it synergizes with 4 Cause and Heroic Sacrifice and all those things. So it's just extra ping damage throughout the game that can really add up, especially with Sabine's ability. And then we have K2SO. He's a 4/4 Overwhelm. When defeated, either make an enemy discard a card from their hand, or they take 3 damage to the base. He's obviously really good. He can help clear out some of those Sentinels and still do some damage in the base. And then his when defeated does more damage in the base, so it's not as simple as your opponent, just kill K2SO, because you're still taking damage. If he gets 1 attack off and then dies and deals 7, you're going to be very, very happy. And he has an event that we'll talk about that he synergizes with. Fleet Lieutenant is really good. 3 for 3/3, gets that +2 attack, and really, if you open with an A-Wing and then go Fleet Lieutenant, you're swinging for 5 in turn 2, which is really good and kind of help you get there, right? Sabine wants to almost get you down from anywhere from 10 to 15 life left, and then kind of finish you with stuff out of hand with Fighters for Freedom, with 4 Cause, with K2SO. So he helps you get, halfway there to where you want to be for the end game. And then we have our space. Our space is really good. Green Squadron A-Wing is one of the best cards in the game for a 2-drop. Like, Red Hero has Sabine and has Green Squadron A-Wing, which I do think are like 2 of the best starters you can go. It's a 1/3, but it has raid 2, so it swings in for 3. So it doesn't trade into a lot if it gets attacked, but it attacking and dealing damage to a base is very, very good. And 3 damage from a space unit, as we've seen, is just really, really insane. And so then another card that synergizes with all these hero cards that I've just listed is Red 3. It has Raid 1 itself, so it is 3/3 on attack, but it also gives Raid 1 to each other friendly heroism unit. So all these units that we just listed would get a +1 attack on top of Sabine as well, the leader. So it's really good. It buffs your whole deck, and we'll see that Fighters for Freedom, Red 3, and 4 Calls all kind of make you build each of these decks in a certain way. And then Wing Leader is really good. Sometimes I feel like it's too slow, and you definitely need to know what matchups you actually want to play this in. You know, just from experience playing Sabine into a Wing Leader into Sabine getting exhausted definitely makes you sad. So sometimes it's even worth it to, like, even if you are forced into playing Wing Leader, you know, maybe just open attack with Sabine. It feels bad that, you know, you don't get the 2 experience tokens on a Rebel unit, but you're glad that you got the 3 damage in instead of your 4 or 5 getting exhausted. So that's that. And then some of the other ones, as you see on the side here, are Partisan, Insurgent, Benthic 2 Tubes, and Wolf. I think all of them are very good cards, but don't necessarily slot into the main deck immediately. I think 2 Tubes might have ended up making all my lists, but he's definitely someone who can come out. He has an on attack, give another aggression unit raid 2, so they would attack for 2 more. It's just very telegraphed. It's very slow in Sabine. I think he's a lot better in Leia, where you can use her ability to attack with him and then attack with another Rebel unit. Whereas this, it gives the opponent more interaction. But he's red, so he does synergize with Fighters for Freedom, but he doesn't synergize with Red 3 or 4 Cause. And then same thing with the Partisan Insurgent. Like, he's good. He's a fine 2-drop. Having another red unit is very, very likely to get him online and get him the raid 2 as well. So, you know, those are just some of the things that you want to include. And Wolf is just really good. 3-2. The base can't be healed when played and on attack for him. And he's got Saboteur as well. So he's going to be able to trade with most things and also get around some of those pesky Sentinel units, you know, that Sabine does not like to see. So those are the base package units that Sabine is generally going to have in all of her lists. And then going over to events, the 2 on the left side are pretty much 3-ofs for me across the board. Heroic Sacrifice, draw a card, then attack with a unit. For this attack, it gets +2, and it gains when this unit deals combat damage defeated. So that includes going to base. So this is really good, you know, drawing another card to have another option, but also giving you reach to deal more damage in the base. And like I said, going back to K2SO, if you do 4 calls with him, he swings in for 6. He is now defeated. You can choose to then deal 3. So this card lets you deal 9 damage with K2SO if you can get into the base with him. So it's really, really good. Also replaces itself, and, you know, as you see in some of these aggro lists, it can be a little tricky to keep your hand full with how much you're playing these 2 and 3 drops. And the other is 4 calls I believe in. Really good. You've probably had this played on you, or at least I've seen some of these content creators play it. But this also is why you want to stack your deck with so many, you know, heroic cards, because you want to make sure you're dealing 3 to 4 damage with this, or even 4 to 5 damage with Fighters for Freedom out. So it's really good. Also lets you just stack your deck and you know what's coming up next in your following turns, or discard them if you realize you don't need those cards, don't want those cards anymore. So not only does it deal damage, it makes your next 2 turns a lot better. And then going off, these are some side ones. These are definitely some options that you can include within your decks that I don't think are necessarily bad, but, you know, with Red 3, with 4 Cause, don't know if they're necessarily worth including. So Keep Fighting is really good. Ready unit with 3 or less power. It's really good with Sabine Leader. It's really good with Sabine. It's really good with, you know, a lot of these, like, on attack abilities with these raid units type thing. You know, readying an A-Wing with a Red 3 out to swing back in for 4 is really, really good. Precision Fire. The Saboteur is fine, but really it's just looking at it as a type of burn. We don't have too many troopers within our deck, I think. I mean, we have 2 tubes, we have Spec Force, sometimes we run Pathfinder, but like even Wolf isn't one. But you do have Fighters for Freedom and Fleet Lieutenant as well. So there definitely are some targets, but like games, if you go heavy into space, Precision Fire is going to be a card that you don't get to use for the burn. Metal Ceremony is something I've used less as it goes on, but it's a heroism card. 3 rebel units that attack this phase. It's really good on the turns where you attack with some units, you deploy Sabine, you attack with Sabine, and then you can buff 2 to 3 of them with an experience token. Definitely been pretty good, and it's also good into those force throw decks, which are choosing you to discard. You know, discarding this and dealing 0 damage definitely feels pretty good. And then if you're in the company of wanting removal, Open Fire is a fine option. Pay 3 to deal 4, though Sabine probably just wants to be going face all the time, and again, doesn't synergize with 4 a cause, I believe in. So that's kind of the red package. There's an upgrade. If you want to bring an upgrade, Infiltrator skill is there. Attached unit gains Saboteur, +1/+1. Maybe like a sideboard option against some of these Luke decks, against some of these shield decks, but not something I'm actively looking to even include in my sideboard as well. So Don't super love it, but, you know, if you run it, I don't think you're too crazy. Just a little stitches. So we're going to start off and looking at our mono red to get this out of the way. This is the one that I'm least excited for. I just feel like the mono red cards aren't amazing. I think Aggression is actually pretty good in a vacuum, but not enough value to make me want to run mono. And then I don't even run the other double mono because I'd almost rather just keep as many heroism cards as I can in my deck. So we'll get into Rallying Cry in just a second. But some of the units that you now add are Alliance X-Wing, Rebel Pathfinder. I think Dodonna is an option. I currently have him in my sideboard, actually. And then I bring in 2 Zeb. He's a heroism unit. And this is one of the lists that Wolf immediately goes in. You're going to have trouble staying as high as you normally do with how many heroism cards you have. I think I'm up to 12 non-heroism cards with 2 tubes, with Wolf, with Keep Fighting, and Aggression. And all of those feel pretty worth it in the mono deck to run. But these options just, like, it's not exciting to run Rebel Pathfinder, not exciting to run Alliance X-Wing, but I do actually think Alliance X-Wing can come into pretty clutch if you want a space race. Like, having that option to pivot space and go space, the Alliance X-Wing is definitely even worth a shout in some of these other decks in which I've maybe dismissed it a little bit more, but still a decent enough option. And then over here on the far side is just a lot of these like single aspect ones. Cantina Bragger, please don't run. Jeddah Agitator, please don't run. Disabling Fangfighter could definitely be a meta call. Ardent Sympathizer is like kind of fine. A 3/3/3 gets +2 if you have initiative. So not like the worst thing in the world, but again, you take away from 4 calls, you take away from red 3. They kind of restrict your deck building options in that way. But if you're going to run one of these outside, I almost do think Starwing Scout might be your best bet. It's a 4/1. It does die to everything, but, you know, plays like Heroic Sacrifice while you have the initiative is really good with that to deal 6 into base, to draw a card from Heroic Sacrifice, and then draw 2 more cards from the Starwing Scout being defeated. So, I mean, that's a really good card for Heroic Sac, and definitely seems like it could be worth trying because 4 damage is also an insane amount. You know, you're losing that heroism symbol, but it still pings with Fighters for Freedom, and the potential card draw could be just game-changing if you're able to hit off, you know, a play like that. And then here are the events and upgrades. If you want some more heroism ones, Carabas could be a play. There's not many 2 high health units in here. I mean, Sabine, the leader herself, is 5, so she could be a decent target to deal 3 from that. You know, if you do play Zeb, he was kind of more just like, I don't love him in the deck necessarily, but sometimes I do go to 5. He could be okay to play. He's heroism, he's red, but he's not lighting the world on fire. But if he is out there, he is a decent Carabas as well, just having 5 health. You know, K2SO might get up there, on, you know, with 4 health. Same thing with Fighter for Freedom. But, you know, a lot of your stuff in your deck is 2 or 3, so you're really not going to get that much value, if anything, from Carabas if you wanted to play it on them. And then now we have the double aspect cards. Aggression, I do like. I think it's good in a vacuum, but feels like it's not as relevant as all the other double aspect ones for me. So you need to play it more, and I know a lot of people are down on Command, saying Command's probably the worst, but I think Aggression in play right now feels like it's actually might be a little bit worse, because I don't think any of the mono decks, I don't think any of the red characters care about being in mono, whereas Vigilance, I feel like they do, right? There's a good Hera Command deck, there's a Tarkin Command deck, there's Boba Yellow, there's like Han Yellow, like all of those kind of make sense, but I feel like when you go into red mono with any of the characters, the deck is kind of like, this is a little bit awkward. But, I mean, it's good. Draw a card, defeat up to 2 upgrades, ready unit with 3 or less, deal 4 damage to a unit are all pretty good options, and you're going to be happy to use any of them. It's just the deck as a whole isn't as exciting. And Rallying Cry, I talked about it on our spoiler review. Each friendly unit gains raid 2. They're just immediately going to trade with them all and not love them. And then just some of the other stuff that I mentioned, Open Fire, Keep Fighting, Infiltrator Skill, Precision Fire, are all in there. I also wanted to shout out Mission Briefing, but I don't particularly love it. Losing out on the Heroism card, I just don't think is worth it to draw 2 cards, especially when you can draw a card with Aggression and Heroic Sacrifice, and, you know, you get some options if you do run Starwing Scout as well. So now we're moving on to Green. Green was actually really interesting to build, because I was surprised still how far I feel like we have to go for red-green to be relevant. So there are some stuff that get to come into play that I do think are pretty good, but as you can see, it's still pretty much just a red deck with some good green support, and that's okay. And you do bring the best base in the game, in my opinion, with Energy Conversation Lab. But you get one of the best 2-drops with Battlefield Marine, and so having that and Sabine and A-Wing means you're going to very likely be able to play one of them turn 1 to have them in your hand. You've got Mon Mothma to help search out some of those other rebels that you might need in a more timely fashion, right? If you feel like you need K2SO in your next hand, she can go and get them. Good chance of finding that. And then Echo Base Defender is good at keeping some of the units that you want to keep alive in your ground, and also he just swings them for 4. Like, he is a fine aggro card. I know Sentinel, you might think, is a stalling card, but he can also just turn out damage and just be a monster in and of himself. And then so looking at some of these other cards on the side, the top 2 are the single aspect ones are Agent Callus and Consortium Star Viper. I do think the Star Viper could be a decent shout simply because of ECL, and if you have the initiative, you could ECL it in, restore 2, and it does kill a lot of things, especially in the Sabine mirror matches, right? If you're going against whether it's green or it is yellow or blue or red, if you get the initiative, ECL that in, heal 2, kill their red 3 or their A-Wing, you're going to come out of that trade pretty happy. Just lose the synergy of no heroism, as all the other cards mentioned. But the 2 heroism cards that I think are worth looking at for units are the Alliance Dispatcher and Akbar. Akbar gives a little bit more longevity of being a body, damage out of hand, and he does have Restore 1. Restore 1 isn't like huge, but when your leader's constantly pinging your own base, he has the ability to help negate that a little bit, and at least give you 1 or 2 health back that your opponent wasn't able to. The Dispatcher just feels a little bit too slow. He's probably going to get sniped. I think you need to just be aggressive and play units that can hit, whereas, right, if you turn 1 him, turn 2 to play K2SO, like, that feels good, but I still feel like that's not aggressive enough because you won't be able to attack until turn 3. But it's something, for me at least, that is worth testing. I think I would definitely try to get him in there and just see how that feels, at least, because you won't know until you play it. And then this was the shocking part for green. There are no green heroism events. So at this point, you need to run like 4 Cause and Heroic Sacrifice, and then you just need to bring in another type of removal. And so it really comes down to like Strike True or Open Fire if you want something. I think both those are fine. Probably go Open Fire because it's just going to be more consistent. You don't have a lot of 4 or above attack. So just run Open Fire. Recruit seems like fine, but especially having Mon Mothma in the deck, I feel like you don't need that. Resupply, I don't think you really care to ramp. And then some of the other ones, like, I actually don't hate stuff like Academy Training, right? You bring out Sabine, slap Academy Training on her. She is now a 4/7 that deals the damage to the enemy base when she attacks. Not terrible. Hardpoint is interesting too because A-Wings are pretty good. But Traders, I don't think fits the mold of what you want to do, right? When you're at 5, you'd rather play a 2 and a 3. Or, like a Heroic Sacrifice and a K2SO or something along those lines. I just feel like Traders is a little bit too slow, a little bit too much investment in the deck, but it certainly could be an option of you take control of their Sentinel units. It's probably like the highest upside that you can get in an aggro deck for playing Traitorous. But the other 2 upgrades like actually are interesting. Most of these Sabine decks are around, at minimum 12 space units, but more often like 14 to 15 with Green Squadron, Red 3, Wing Leader, and Alliance X-Wing. You can already have 12, and then this one runs Bright Hope as well in space, and Bright Hope is insane, and it must have somehow got deleted. I had it right at the bottom there, but as you can see, it's in the list. Bright Hope is really just good at just neutralizing space, protecting your A-Wings, protecting your Red 3, and it's just all around a really, really good card to have in green because you're getting 2 Sentinels, 1 in ground, 1 in space. This can help you stabilize your board and keep just turning out some damage for that. And now we're going to jump over to the list that probably everybody has an opinion on because this is the one that's been the most famous out of any of the Sabine lists, and that is yellow. This has been the one that when people talk about the burn list, this is the burn list. Yellow really gets you some insane damage closers or even openings with the Falcon and Surprise Strike, and then you even get like a good 3/2 with the Lothal Insurgent, and Leia definitely gives you some stall options if their leaders are coming out early. Or even in aggro mirrors, being able to exhaust Leia or exhaust the opposing Sabine can be really, really, really good. And Bamboozle's fine, right? Another just decent exhaust option. It fits the heroism mold, so that's why you kind of like that in there. And so, like I said, those are the 3 options for units that are really good. And actually, the yellow, like, event soldier ground unit package is very interesting, because I do feel like all of the ones listed on the side could have a place within the deck. And so Chopper is probably the most interesting and one that I want to try more of. He is a 1/3, so that you're like 1/3 in an aggro deck. But, if you bring Ezra into the deck as well, you have Chopper, you have Ezra, you have Sabine unit, you have Sabine leader, so there's a decent chance that he can get that raid 1 on him. He's also heroism, so he works with all the things that you're doing in your deck. And then his on attack can really just stall out some of these other decks if they do hit it. Could really just mess up a turn for Krennic. Could really just mess up a turn for even some of these aggro decks that they have to play with 1 resource less. And so he can be an absolute menace, but he doesn't necessarily fit that aggro role that you're hoping for. And so Ezra comes into that same spot of that he's really good. He has a high ceiling in the fact that he can play a Surprise Strike off the top of the deck, or play a For a Cause, or play a Heroic Sacrifice to deal more damage if you have another ready unit, like for a Heroic Sac or Surprise Strike. And his upside in that sense is very, very good. He's just a little bit too slow, and he doesn't work for Fighters for Freedom. But he's still got a lot of synergy, and he is like the 51, 52, 53 for me in the deck. Whether that means he goes in the sideboard or not, sometimes that can be a different story. But him at the 3 is a pretty good. Rogue Operative is another good one. Just comes down and can absolutely just start destroying your opponent. But same thing, I think it's just a little bit too slow and doesn't necessarily, do what you were kind of hoping to do with a lot of these other aggressive cards as well. So it's got Saboteur, it's got Raid 2, it's a 2/4, but, there might be some other options. But definitely a 4/4 in attack with Saboteur is going to be really good. And then I use the Liberator Gunship in here because it could actually be a decent tech in the same idea that the Star Viper is, in that it's a 3/4, so it can trade with the A-Wings with Red 3. It's got ambush, it can come in and blow something up. And then the last one is Chewbacca, who's actually kind of interesting in the sense that he can be aggro. He's just got a little lower attack than what you would love. But you can drop him, they got to do damage to him, he readies, you do the 3 to base. If he can eat another attack and ready again, you can do 3 to base again, and then he's probably dead after that. But being able to push some extra damage with him could be pretty relevant, and also keep some of your other units alive. The issue becomes at 5 resources in these decks, you'd almost always rather play Falcon in the Surprise Strike, or like a Fighters for Freedom or a For a Cause. It's very seldom that you go to 5 and want to play a 5. You're usually looking to play 2 cards. And then the events, like I said, Surprise Strike, just +3 damage for 2 is amazing. Bamboozle fits the Heroism suite and Exhaust, which is fine. And then yellow, has some other good tricks as well. Spark Rebellion isn't the best because I don't know how much you care about an opponent's hand, but it certainly goes again into that Heroism suite. And then you have Waylay, Asteroid Sanctuary, and Shoot First, all which help you and your units stay alive to do more damage, even though they aren't damage events as well. Just the issue that I have with all of them is that you're really only wanting anywhere from 6 to 9 non-heroes and cards in your deck, and so Surprise Strike is a must. And then from there, you need to decide: do you want Wolf? Do you want Benthic? If it's no for both them, then maybe some of these cards can come in. And the upgrades don't seem worth it. Smuggling Compartment is neat on Falcon, but I just don't think you're really ever playing it. But again, you're at 15 space units in yellow, and so you're going to have some options to play it on it, but don't know how much you actually care. And Snapshot's interesting too, in the sense that it just looks it looks pretty good to do a damage on attack. And then our last one is blue, which has been getting a lot more traction in the Discord lately, and I do find interesting. Its best part for me is that it's bringing in Security Complex. So you can shield one of your units early to make sure it stays on the board, and that goes well into Sabine, and the A-Wing, to me, are just phenomenal aggressive drops that you want to play, right? If you have to do it on 2 tubes in the Spec Force, I get it, but A-Wing, Sabine are both really, really good, and Restored Arc doesn't feel as good to do that on. But even if you need to wait around and then use it on a Red 3 or use it on a Fighters for Freedom, both those options are good as well. You get a little nervous using shields and ground because Saboteur is something that will just completely negate the thing you sacrificed 5 health for. So using that on an A-Wing, using that on Red 3 is going to guarantee that shield gets use. And so the units that we have here, you bring in Yoda, you bring in Kanan, you bring in Restored Arc, and so what this does for your deck is that it actually lets you push to be like an aggro-y mid-range, right? There's some buzzwords thrown out there, but, you know, this yellow deck, once you do the damage, especially with your leader, or you take damage, there is no way to get that health back, right? You're both doing 1-1, you're both doing 1-1 with the ability, but playing Yoda, playing Kanan, playing Restored Arc lets you restore health to make the game go, when it does go a little bit longer, all the damage that you did to your base doesn't affect you as much as it affects your opponent. And so they're all fine. Yoda is honestly probably the hardest one. Like a 3-drop with 2 attack just feels bad, but he does draw a card when he dies. Kanan at a 4/5 to me is fine. You'd rather play K2SO likely if you do have him in hand, but Kanan is still just a decent option. And Restored Arc is, you know, a better version of the Alliance X-Wing in that it gives restore, but you'd rather play an A-Wing. And some of the other options we have, like the Consular Security Force, is nice in that it's got 7 health, but it only does 3 damage for a 4 cost, and I don't think you really want that. It does have the Rebel trait, so it could be Wing Leader, Fleet Lieutenant, etc., but I don't think the large amount of health is something that you actually care about. And then same thing, Vigilant, Honor Guard, they honestly always get some type of damage in them, so they lose their Sentinel extremely fast. But if you're looking for a 5-drop Sentinel, maybe that could be, but it runs into the same issue of what I talked about with Chewbacca. And now I have Obi-Wan and Luke in here, not in the sense that you would ever really want to main deck them, but those two definitely could be viable sideboard options to help you go against those mid-range decks. I don't think they'll really help too much against Control. I think Control, if you go too late, you're probably losing anyways, but, you know, against some of these other decks that you're now restoring more and you're okay going a little bit later, these are definitely going to help out that, like, top end of your deck, to where it just makes it easier for you to block them damage into base, and also dropping Luke Skywalker is going to be really good. So they definitely could come in for some matchups, but not something I'm thinking that I would want to main board at this point. And then events and upgrades, there's a lot for blue. The 3 Heroism event and upgrades, the Force is with me, I think is really good, and actually more of a closer than something that you want to necessarily play on curve. And so we do have some Force units that can help pull this off with Yoda and Kanan, and actually think that's it. So having them out can be pretty important, but I do like this. It gives the ability to do multiple things within one action, to attack, to give 2 experience, and it has a lot of upside with what you're trying to do. And the Jedi lightsaber and Luke's lightsaber to me are just really good in pumping out damage a little bit faster, right? They're like a slower tempoed surprise strike in a sense, right? Luke's lightsaber, you're paying 2 to do 3, but it's got to go on a unit, and the unit's got to live. So both them, right, if you drop either of them on Sabine, you're looking pretty happy. They just are a little bit slower, not as quickly tempo paced as something like Surprise Strike, but certainly worth an option. I don't have Luke's in mind right now, but definitely have 3 of Jedi Lightsaber, and I could see the argument for Luke's coming in, even though you don't really run Luke in the deck. Just paying 2 for potentially 3 or more damage is pretty good. And then you have the whole slew of non-heroism cards with Entrench and Resilient for upgrades, Moment of Peace, Takedown, Make an Opening, Repair, Vanquish for events. The only one that I really consider is Moment of Peace, and I had that in my deck until the Forces with me got spoiled, and now I took Moment of Peace out, and I have that in there. I don't really think you want to be paying 4 or 5 for Takedown or Vanquish in an aggro deck. Making an Opening, same thing, like 3 is a lot, but, you know, potentially healing your base, making it go a little longer. -2 on one of their Sentinels to make it easier for you to trade and come out alive, like, could be good. And then Repair's there. I don't think you ever really do run Repair kind of in the deck, though, because it's just not, like, doing too much. The only time I ever really played Repair is Chirrut, I think, to heal him back beyond his thing. And so that's what all these decks look like, right? You got yellow as the standard aggro version. You have blue as a healing version that kind of prolongs the game. Green, you know, you can ramp with it if you want to. Wouldn't necessarily recommend that. But green has 2 really good Sentinels to block both sides of the board. And Aggression lets you bring the double aspect cards, and you don't even bring one of them. But the only upgrade you really get from that deck is being able to run Aggression. Again, I just don't think that's worth it. So this is my ranking of the current ones. I still need to test blue more to see how high it can go, and also need to play some games with green to see where it even falls. But currently, to me, I think splashing green doesn't really do enough of adding a 2/3/3, you know, a 2/6 in space and a 4/3 on ground of the last two being Sentinels. But this is where I'm currently thinking for Sabine. These all seem like good starting points. You definitely want to know what's in her deck and what her deck is trying to do, because you are going to play against this, I bet, even come May in Store Showdowns. Will she still be an S tier deck? Who knows? I mean, aggro is going to be good, no doubt about that in first set, but will it be her? Will it be Leia? Either way, you should know what these decks do and prepare. So, as always, you know, give us a follow on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook. Let us know what leader you want us to do next, and as always, you know, some feedback on this. You know, I know the lists aren't perfect, so don't necessarily, you know, still love to chat lists, but if those are off, you know, don't go crazy for me, because some of those are just kind of thrown together to make sure I have a 50 and at least have some general thoughts of that. But if you have any feedback of how the video should go, thing like that, always feel free to drop a comment or message me on Discord or whatever it might be. But as always, thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.